Hello orchid lovers, and welcome back to my orchid life. I appreciate you coming over for another visit, and today I want to talk about why I think that the Phalaenopsis orchid is the #1 orchid as far as being sold in the world. One reason obviously is going to be they are found everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. You cannot walk into a big box store. You cannot walk into a Walmart, a grocery store. There's a lot of gas stations now that are selling Phalaenopsis. And most of the time they are going to be found with the other houseplants. So why not buy a Phalaenopsis as a houseplant? Look at those pretty blooms. Now, a lot of people will get them home, and once the blooms fade, they throw them away. And then they buy another one. Well, I think after a few purchases, they go online and they're like, hey, how do I take care of this thing? Can I get it to bloom again? Because, you know, they go over to somebody else's house and they're like, oh my gosh, you've got blooms. Where'd you buy it? Oh, I've had this for 5 years. Oh, how'd you get it to rebloom? So they think, I think I'll go get me another one, see what I can do with it. They find out that it is not a difficult orchid to take care of. Because as we orchid growers know, or collectors, I'm not quite a grower, I'm more of a collector right now, I'm still learning the growing part. But as we know, they are very forgiving. Most of us have started with the Phalaenopsis. They will create roots rather quickly in the right environment. They will rebloom for us, and we'll go into how to get them to rebloom in just a moment. They were originally brought over to Europe in 1875 by Carl Ludwig Bloom, who was a Dutch botanist. And I can just imagine him out there in the Asian Pacific area, which is where many of the species are found. And he comes across this gorgeous flower, and he's thinking to himself, you know, I bet my other plant buddies over at home would really dig this plant. So he does just that. He takes it back to Europe and he shows his plant buddies and he's like, hey guys, look what I found. They're like, oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. I don't know if they said that or not. It's just kind of, I'm imagining it. That same year of 1875, an English breeder, and I'm assuming he was also a collector of orchids to be a breeder, but an English breeder, John Sneeden, or Seeden, S-E-D-E-N, he created the first hybrid of the Phalaenopsis. The Europeans discovered rather quickly that these did not do well in a parlor. So we have to go back in time and remember this was before electricity. Central heating, maybe not before electricity, but it was definitely before central heating. They didn't heat their homes the way we do. These guys don't like a lot of cold. They'll go down to a pretty cool temperature. They'll tolerate quite a bit. They're pretty tolerant of different temperatures. Now, ideally, their temperature would be between 70 degrees and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but they will go, you know, down to 55. I think I read somewhere even they'll go down to 40. I don't know. I've never got them that low. They started growing them in greenhouses, and that's, you know, they kind of got popular with that. And then their popularity kind of died down a little bit. And then for some reason in the 1960s, I don't know if orchid or if nurseries just were like, oh, you know what? I think I can create this and mass produce it. So that's what they did. So since the early 1960s, the Phalaenopsis has been mass produced and pushed out to stores, and we humans have been buying them. And then from this Phalaenopsis, we end up down a rabbit hole, many of us, and end up with all different types of orchids. But that's for another video. The bonuses. Let's talk about the bonuses. Now, the bonuses are, like I said, they're very forgiving. They are very temperature tolerant. The rule of thumb with a Phalaenopsis is if you're comfortable, they're comfortable. They do not require special lighting as long as you give them nice, bright, indirect light. They do not like direct sunlight, as is seen on this leaf right here. Let me just show you. See this part right up here? That was the beginning of sunburn. I had her a little too close to the window, and I was not paying attention to the changing of the sun this time of the year in September, and she was getting a little too much sun on that leaf. Speaking of the sun, if you do grow your Phalaenopsis near a window or in a windowsill, because they are known as good windowsill growers, be careful with the amount of sun it gets. So early morning sun and late afternoon sun is good, but not the direct heat of the day sun. And that is very important if you are growing, especially in a south-facing window. you want to make sure you have a sheer curtain or something that is kind of filtering that sun. But again, I wouldn't recommend anything more than morning sun or afternoon sun. Another great thing about the Phalaenopsis, I think is a bonus, is their long-lasting blooms. Blooms can last up to a year if the original spike continues to extend, like iris here, or if they branch off of here and continue to produce blooms. You can have it really for an indefinite amount of time as long as it's blooming and extending or branching or whatnot. However, do know that the orchid puts a lot of energy into blooms. A lot of times they will ignore the rest of the structure in order for the blooms to continue, because remember, this is their way of propagating in the wild. I think it's ants and bees. So that's why the orchid, and really all orchids, put a lot of energy into the bloom. Another bonus, I believe, in my opinion, again, is the variety of what the hybrids can give you. I know that the most of the colors are in that, what I said was the white, pink, purple, and yellow combinations, but those combinations are amazing. Let's just look at the loose berry here. So I will set her down to keep her from shaking too much, but look at that combination. So she has the white with the little purple here, and then she's got the deep purple lip. Again, very nice combination. And then Iris, let me just take her out of her pot real quick. Although she has purple, she also has this lovely spotting on her, and then the darker purple right there in the throat. So that to me is very interesting. And then of course we have the DTPS over here that has the yellow with the splash of, it's probably a burgundy reddish color, but again, it's purple. I like the fact that they do produce roots rather quickly, and most orchids you can grow them in anything, but Phalaenopsis really will grow in and on anything. I have them in bark only, I have them in bark and perlite, I have them in bark and charcoal, I have them in moss. This one here is in just large perlite, like that's all that's in this pot. And then this one here is in leca, and look at the roots going down into that pot. But they are very forgiving as far as producing roots, not necessarily rather quickly, but I find that they produce their roots and kind of recover a little bit quicker than most of the other orchids that I have. And that could may be a factor in that I've had these longer, so I have a little more experience with them as opposed to the other orchids that I have. Now, the cons of having Phalaenopsis orchids. I have read, I have not experienced, but that they are prone to mealybugs. So far, knock on wood, I have not had any issues with mealybugs or spider mites, because they are also known to be prone to spider mites. So far, I've not had an issue. Of course, I've only had maybe 4 or 5 at a time in my home up until this last year, where I've grown my collection quite extensively. And currently I have about 50 plus of the hybrids, and I do check them rather frequently, and I'm on the lookout for mealybugs, because I do have a string of bananas that was hanging over some of the orchids that I did find mealybugs on, that has since been put in isolation, and she hangs by herself on the wall. So far I haven't seen any, but I'm always on the lookout. That's another reason when I bring an orchid home, I'm very diligent about cleaning their leaves, both the upper side and the underside, and that's the only time I wipe the underside. I try not to do it during the evening or later in the day, because I've read that the stomatas open at night on these, and that's when they do their thing. So I try not to do it too much, too heavy, but I do clean the underside of my leaves when I first get them, just because I'm afraid of bugs. The other major drawback to these guys is crown rot or root rot. So crown rot, though, is where water gets in the crown, it rots the whole stem. So what the Phalaenopsis leaves grow off of is a monopodial stem. So monopodial is one stem. Unlike, say, your Cattleyas or your Oncidiums that have pseudobulbs and grow on a rhizome, this just grows off of the one stem. and water gets either in the middle right here, or you get water that drips down into the leaf joint here and sits, which then gets into the crown, rots it from the inside. And it is possible to recover that if it grows a cakey, but if it doesn't, it's gone. It's just gone. Root rot. Now, root rot is where you put it in a media and you keep that media too wet, or those roots are already on their way out and you just keep it too wet and you don't have a nice airy environment for them. The velamen, which is the bright green part that you see right here, the outer coating, that's the velamen. The velamen will rot and turn a brown, black, yucky color. And then the inside where the string is, which is your root, dies off. And that can take your plant down. That to me is the main things that I've found that are issues with them, outside of, like I said, I haven't had any bug issues, knock on wood. Not saying that I never will, but I have not as of yet. I'm sure as my collection grows, I will encounter an issue at some point or another. Another drawback is they can get pretty big. So if you're very limited on space, or you only have a windowsill or a small area to grow them in, choose the ones that are going to stay a little bit more compact and smaller. Like the loose berry here is considered a small to medium size, whereas like this Xinying diamond she's a big girl. Okay, she is a big girl, and she's just going to get taller and wider, as is my pom-pom here. Okay, she's going to be a pretty big girl too. So when you're in the store and you're looking, keep that into consideration. Do you have the space for these girls to continue to grow and get larger? A lot of people struggle with reblooming these guys. Many sources say that a drop in night temperature between 55 and 65 degrees will induce them into spiking. I am going to attempt to do that this year. I have done it a couple of times in putting my orchids outside at night, of course back when I had only like 10, and I did have some that spike, but some that didn't, because they don't all react to that. If you have one that has a lot of the summer blooming parentage, then that Phalaenopsis is more than likely going to bloom for you in the spring and summer, as opposed in the fall and winter, where 90% of our hybrids are prone to spike. So I am going to set up a shelf in a spare bedroom and put all of my Phalaenopsis in there, except for, of course, the ones that are either still stressed and in recovery, or in what I call my ICU category. But all the ones that are healthy, that have put on lots of growth this year, I am going to set them in there and close the door at night, put a towel at the door so no heat will flow in there, keep the windows open, and I'm going to test and see if giving them a drop at night will help induce them into spiking. Because as I've stated in a previous video, I am wanting a massive blooming this year of my Phalaenopsis hybrids. Let me know in the comments down below, did you start with Phalaenopsis before you ran down that rabbit hole of orchid collecting? Or was there another orchid that you started with, and do you still like Phalaenopsis? Do you have any Phalaenopsis? And if you do, how many do you have? And are they primarily hybrids, or are they the species? Do you still consider them a collectible orchid, or are you in the category of this is the common orchid? And a lot of people call it the common orchid simply because you can find it everywhere. You're not going to go into your local big box grocery store and always find a Miltonia or a Zygonesia or Zygopetalum or a Cattleya. You can run across them occasionally, they'll be there. I'm not saying you'll never find them, but you're always going to find a Phalaenopsis. There's always, always, always going to be a Phalaenopsis in those stores. So with that, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. If I touched on something and didn't go into detail and you want more information, let me know in the comments down below. I'll be happy to get back to you. I read all of my comments and try to answer everyone in a timely manner. It doesn't always happen in the time frame that I would like, but I do answer. And let me know again how you feel about the Phalaenopsis. Hope you guys have a great and wonderful day. Continue to stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.